This is going to be video lecture 15. All right, so when you get to YouTube, that's 15. Am I correct? Did we get up to 14 yet?
Yeah, we were 14.
We got 14 up,
Yeah.
right? And we got 11 up. We got 11 up. Okay, so that's 14 lectures. That's like 14 hours of solid philosophy, and the class should be around 40 hours. So you get at the end of this, we should have 40 hours of video. That's pretty good. That's the prescribed amount for a full semester of teaching. So we're good. Go ahead.
Was there not class on Thursday? Because I didn't see anything come up on Thursday.
I put up an announcement, and there was not class, and that was because my family got sick. My daughter had a fever,
Right.
my son had a fever, my wife was all, oh, I'm sick. And I was nice and chipper, but I thought I didn't want to be a carrier monkey and bring in the disease that they had. And it clearly didn't hit me. I was up, and running this morning, so I felt good.
Okay, cool. So we're caught up then.
Yeah, and we did get tested, so it wasn't COVID, so I'm not just walking around with COVID all over me. It's just a good old-fashioned cold, and a little baby who couldn't breathe through her nose and shoot. But I didn't know, and I didn't want to bring it to you, okay? I like to share, but I don't like to share my disease, okay? So, that's why.
Okay.
But I did put up a video for you to watch. Did you watch it?
Yeah,
What'd you think?
it was good. It
Yeah,
was like a lot of information there.
And we're going to talk about a lot of that, okay, today. Because really, that's J.P. Moreland. That was my mentor. I went to learn under him in one of my graduate degrees. And he is a world-class philosopher of mind. Okay, so when I tell you this stuff, I'm not the guy who, I read the books he told me to read, and I assessed them myself, and I saw the arguments, and I understand them myself. But this man is a master of this particular field. And if you could learn from him, praise God, because he's had several bouts of cancer, as you noted on the video, right? So I don't know if you mentioned that he had skin cancer, rare skin cancer for a while. He thought he was going to die, and then he had colon cancer.
Yikes.
And so we've got a prayer group, called Pray for JP on Facebook. And so whenever you get a note from there, you're like, oh boy, it's time to pray for JP again. JP also went through a bout of depression and he admits this. He wrote a book called The Lost Virtue of Happiness, which, by the way, in your book, you guys should be reading book 1 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and you did read it?
No, I just made note that you said that.
Get to it.
Yes, sir.
Because that's going to discuss the nature of happiness. What does it mean to be happy? Okay, if we are in America, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Did Thomas Jefferson mean the pursuit of pleasure? Did he mean wealth? Did he mean health? Did he mean, worldly goods? Or is happiness something else? Okay, and so J.P. Moreland wrote a book, co-authored it with a good friend of his over at Talbot School of Theology. It's called The Lost Virtue of Happiness, and then JP kind of discusses his own struggles with depression and how the mind and the body are two unique things. Okay, remember we talked about our distinctions, the real distinction. If A can exist without B and B can exist without A, then they're two different things.
Mm-hmm.
So he's suggesting that the mind or the soul, the suke, is different than the body, the sarx, right? And that if we affect the brain, we can affect the mind. And thus he would say, if you're suffering from depression, it is okay if you have a broken brain to fix it chemically. Like if you have a broken speaker on a stereo, your stereo seems to be fine, but your speaker's busted, you get a better speaker, and then the stereo operates better, okay? I know a lot of us don't use stereos anymore. It's more headsets on iPhones, okay? If your earbuds are broken, then you fix that, or if you have a malfunctioning software on your phone, you can fix the hardware, right? And maybe the software will work better.
Mm-hmm.
So the body, so now of course, so far in our lectures, what we've been talking about is the view from the materialist point of view, the naturalist point of view, where they believe that everything that exists is physical. And if everything that exists is physical, so too is the mind. Okay, if I am a brain, and the brain is physical, then I am physical. And if the brain is nothing more than atoms, then I am nothing more than atoms. Okay? Now that kind of takes away, as I said before, of anything special about who we are. Okay? Because what is special about a particular shape or function of atoms compared to another shape or function of atoms?
How complex it is.
Why is that better? It's just descriptively it is only more complex.
Okay.
Prescriptively it doesn't say anything. A lawnmower is pretty darn complex, right?
Yes.
Diamonds are less complex, but which is worth more.
The diamond.
Sure. And it's worth more, not in and of itself in a way, but more on who values it.
Yeah, we value the diamond.
I mean, certainly if my lawn, I'm not going to mow a lawn with a diamond. I mean, it depends, you know. I mean, in a world where everything's made of diamonds, I'm sure we'd be like, how do we get rid of all these diamonds, you know? And wish I had a lawnmower to mow them all down, but I don't know. So you can see the value might change dependent on, you know, there's two types of value, what you'll find out in Aristotle. One of the types of value is instrumental, and the other type is in value for itself, right? You have instrumental value, so money is good instrumentally. It is good to buy things, right?
Right.
And then you have intrinsic value, this idea that something is valuable for, like you are valuable for who you are. You are not valuable for what you do. Now, as an employee, you would be valuable for what you provide. Instrumentally, you could be replaced, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you yourself, beyond the value you provide in, say, work, you are valuable for who you are, as you are, okay?
Right.
Now, of course, if we're nothing more than just big clumps, big bags of physical parts and wholes, then of course, I don't know where value would come from. Okay, just a big bag of guts. Okay, but you're more than that, aren't you? You're a moral being.
Yes.
There's something to you that is greater than merely the atoms that make you up. And that's why we say we don't want to treat people like objects, like women in porn are treated as objects. That they are valuable only in as much as they can produce that crap. Okay? But instead of being valued for who they are. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's go back to our Porphyrian tree, right? And we were talking about philosophy of mind. And remember, when I talk about philosophy of mind, you know, in psychology, they call it the psyche, which is the soul, but they use it as the mind, which the word is really the nous. So they change it to mind because I think they want to sanitize it of all religious implications, you know. But here we go. We got philosophy of mind. I gave you two options, right? You had the monists over here. So, and in monism, we had the physicalist or materialist. And you had the idealist, which believes that all things are non-physical, thus if the mind exists, it is one substance, right? Mind exists as one substance and it's non-physical, right? That would mean the body is nothing more than illusion of sorts, phenomena, non-physical stuff, okay? But physicalists would say, no, that everything is, the mind is a single substance and it is a physical thing. And then I gave you a breakdown that would say the reductionist view. And I said that there was several types of that, and one of them was behaviorism. And there were two types of behaviorism. One was methodological, I'll just put the M for that, and the other one was philosophical behaviorism. And methodological behaviorism just says, hey, I notice you're crying, you must be sad. I could be wrong, you could be acting. It's just Method just says we notice behaviors are associated with mental states, and the majority of the time when you're smiling, it must mean you are feeling joy. Okay? Methodological. It's a very good tool for determining what's going on in somebody's life. I notice that when a kid is acting out in class, there must be something going on at home. Okay? I've noticed that there are certain behaviors associated with certain mental events, and thus they do certain things that are associated with that. It's not 100% guaranteed, but statistically it's a good indication of something going on in their mind. The philosophical behaviorism says no, the mental state is identical to the behavior. The behavior is a physical thing, which is nothing more than the monistic theory of the mind. So your mental states are identical to behavior states, which is false because we know you can have behavior states and not have the mental states. You can have the mental states without the behavior states. I can be sad without crying, and I can be crying without being sad. Therefore, the behavior is not identical to the mental state. It was easily debunked. Nobody really fights for it anymore. But behaviorism as a methodological approach is definitely awesome for the psychologists. I'm going to keep harping on that. The type was the one that said, each type of mental state is identical to a physical state. So if you have the mental state of pain, you must have a certain physical state. We'll call that the C fiber firing event. Anytime there's a C fiber firing event, you have pain because they are identical. Pain is identical. The word pain is identical to the physical event that we call a C fiber firing event. They are two words for the same physical thing. Okay, but then we have these things called possible world scenarios. I talked about the possible world, and when in this possible world we came up with the problem of Martian pain. I didn't come up with it. It was come up with long before I was ever a philosophy student. And the problem of Martian pain says if we can imagine a possible world where there are other beings out there that have C fiber firing events and don't have pain, or that in this case they're made of something else and they still have pain, they don't have C fiber firing events, then we know that they are not identical, that the mental event is not identical to the type of mental event is not identical to a type of physical event. Does it make sense? That's good?
Absolutely.
I'm speeding. This is just,
Right.
okay. And this is going to be very important to you as a neuroscientist because you're going to be looking at brain events. The question is the mental event identical to the brain event, or does it merely correlate with the brain event? Correlation does not entail identity. Correlation does not entail identity. Just because every time you have a triangle you have three sides, you have triangularity, it doesn't follow that triangularity is identical to trilaterality. Triangularity is not identical to trilaterality, even if they correlate 100% of the time and cannot do otherwise. All triangular objects are trilateral objects, and all trilateral objects are triangular objects. They have to be together, but they are not identical because they are not the same thing. A plane is not an angle. And just because every time you have a C fiber firing event and you have pain, it doesn't follow that they are identical, even if they correlate. But the type theorist is going to reduce the mental event to that physical event. And all you have to know is that if you could imagine one without the other, then they are not the same thing. Freaky Friday imagines a possible world where a mother and a daughter switch bodies. But they didn't switch brains, did they?
No.
So you can imagine the mind being different than the brain, which shows that they're not the same thing. Does it make sense to you guys? Okay. You see, this is where you can't imagine a world where there's a square circle, correct? Circles are not something we can imagine exist.
No.
Okay? Squares with all sides equidistant from the center, right? Circles with angles, no. We can't imagine that. And if we can't imagine it, it's impossible. But if it is possible that you can imagine a mind not being in a body, then you know that it is not identical to the body, because if it was identical to the body, you wouldn't be able to imagine it. And that was type. And we dealt with Martian pain on it. Okay? We went over here to the non-reductionists. where there's an admittance that this isn't reducing the way it should. If A is identical to B and B is identical to C, then A is identical to C. They're going, well, that's not working. And so over here, the non-reductionists, they came up with this idea called token-token. And it was in response to Martian pain, as I said. And it says each token, mental event, each token of mental event. Okay, I got to explain this for our guests, but it's great because in doing so, it's a good review. Who recalls what the type token distinction is? So this is a, how many of you guys have a book on your Plato book, your Aristotle book? Okay, you have one and you have one. You both have the same type of book, right? But you don't have the same token.
Right.
The token is distinct, but the type is the same. Okay?
Right.
That's why we have the type over here and the token over here. Each token of pain is identical to itself. And each token of pain is identical to whatever physical thing that is. Whether it be the Martian's makeup, nervous makeup, or whether it be the human, C fibers. Each token is identical to its own mental state. So the token of mental event pain, right? For the Martian, might be one thing. And the token, the mental event of pain, you know, I don't even know what we call that Martian pain. You call it Q fiber firing if they had fibers at all, I don't know. But then you have pain over here, the C fiber.
So so you're saying that the subjective is different with each person. That's what the.
Well, what we're saying in metaphysics, we're asking, okay, so.
Everybody has pain, but the subjective of their experience is different for everyone.
Right, but what do we all have in common? Pain.
The physical
Pain.
sense of pain.
There's a pain. There's a mental
Right.
sense of pain.
Right.
That's what we're sensing. We're sensing what's called the phenomena, the mental event. Okay, is we talked about phantom limb,
Okay.
where you cut a guy's leg off and he's going, oh, thank God you saved my foot, doctor. My foot's still hurting, and the doctor says, I got some bad news. That's called phantom limb. You're not feeling your pain. So where is that pain? It's the mental event of pain, and it's assumed to be located where his foot was. Okay? Okay, we don't know what the pain's, but I mean, this is, Stu Getz, a philosopher of mind, talked about the extendedness of the soul, that the soul does extend through the body. You remove a foot, perhaps you're still feeling the pain down there because your soul still extends, but I don't know. That was one of the first lectures I went to in philosophy of mind back in 2000. That was 20 years ago. All right? We were at the philosophy house in Biolette House where all the philosophers hung out. All right, so token suggests, okay, I gotta go back to universals. This might help you feel it out, okay? A universal is a multiply exemplifiable abstract entity. There is blackness on this pen, right? And there is blackness on your mask, correct? And there is blackness on your computer. Blackness is a universal. It is multiply exemplifiable. You notice that?
Mm-hmm.
It is not a physical thing. I can't say, get me some black. You can give me some paint that is black, right?
Right.
That exemplifies blackness. But I would tell you, I just want the black. Like, well, I can't give you the black, I can give you the paint. I don't want the paint, I want the black, okay? And so pain is a universal in that it can be multiply exemplified. You know what pain is, right? And I know what you're talking about. I don't feel your pain, but I can't feel your C fibers if I'd have to dissect her, of course, and she'd probably not like that, right? You're gonna chase people around with scalpels. I want to see your pain, right?
Right.
Okay. So the thing is, with the token, it's saying each pain is unique to itself, to whatever physical thing it's made up of. Well, the problem with that is, it's still has this name called pain. Why do we call it pain? It hasn't escaped the universal property of hurting that we all experience, whether it be Martian pain, whether it be human pain, or whether it be some other being pain. Whatever token it is, it still has something that it has not escaped, that they all have in common, and that is called what? Pain. So here, let's give you a little thing called, now this is not the answer to that, but I think I would like to show it to you, and you're going to have to know it anyway. It's called mereology. We talked about it briefly not too long ago. Mereology, it's a study of part-whole relations, and I can guarantee that this is a test question. What is mereology? It is a study of part-whole relations. And in mereology, we get the concept of emergentism. What is that? It means something emerges from the complexity of the parts. So I start putting rocks down here, and that individual rocks have their own identity, but once I start putting them together, something new emerges, and what is that new thing that emerges?
A pile of rocks.
A pile. Okay? I could do so with parts of an engine, or remember the parts of a boat.
Yes.
We dealt with the boat. Tuggy. And so mereology deals with the part-whole relations from the part. And so a lot of people argue, and we're going to get to that soon, that the mind emerges from the parts of the brain, the complexity of the brain. That would be fine, which will have a problem with that. I'm going to deny it. Okay? But what I want to show here is that you could have a pile of rocks. You could have a pile of laundry. Most of you have that in your house right now, especially if you're your age, right? Get a pile of clothes somewhere, you know. You both have piles, but each pile is made up of different things. Okay? And what I'm trying to tell you is with the pain thing, I'm not saying the pain is emergent from the parts, but even, they're saying that pain is identical to each token. Problem is you still have the pain. Different tokens, but you'll still have the pain, which is the same. And they're trying to argue that it is not the same. And if it's not the same, then why are you calling it pain? See, the goal here for them is to turn mental events into physical events because they believe that everything that exists is what? Physical. And you've got to deal with the mental. You got to go, well, what about the mind? What about the mental properties? We talked about the will, right? The desires. We talked about emotions. And what are those? Oh, they're just chemicals, right? Okay. What about intention and aboutness? You can't reduce that, okay, to chemicals. The next one is functionalism. A lot of there should be a lot of talk about this, and a lot of people are going to believe this one right now as we speak. Maybe not in this class, probably not in this class. But because we live in the information age, and the computer age. As I grew up, computers were just starting to kind of emerge as something popular. When I was, 12, they had the Tandy Corporation, which created the Commodore 64, right? And I think that was like 64 megs of total memory, not even RAM, you know, and you had these floppy disks to make sure you hold them on the corner, right? It's horrible. The videos were horrible. But they talked about the brain being nothing more than a complex biological computing device, okay? And all that mental events turn out to be are functions. So in a way, this is going to be similar to behaviorism. The problem is it's a little more complex. So what is artificial intelligence? Can anybody tell me that?
What is what?
Artificial intelligence, AI.
It's a rough definition, but it's intelligence that.
What is intelligence?
in,
Yeah, see, that's where the rub is. That's where they beg the question. Begging the question is not saying, hey, what, it doesn't cause you to question something. Begging the question is a logical term. It's a fallacy that says you are presupposing that which you need to prove. But go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
the definition that I can come up with is that it is a type of intelligence that creates itself, but it's not organic. So,
It's created by human.
well, it's good.
Like it's able to think for itself.
Is it?
I mean, no, but yes. It can problem solve,
No,
but it's been programmed to do so.
Programmed.
Yeah.
false.
What is
That's
that?
intelligent.
What does he mean by that?
A human does it first.
Well, what was programming?
Like the codes and stuff to
Codes,
make
what's
it do what
code?
it's doing. I don't know. It's not my
No,
major.
you're not. I'm a Bible
That's
major.
the
I'm not
opposite of my major.
But you're doing really well. No, I mean, you're really doing so far so good. First of all, we start out with commands.
Mhm.
And you set it up in a certain way that the way oh god, I wish my son were here, the older one who's a computer programmer.
Binary code.
Yeah, what is binary? Binary is two. It's either on or off.
Mhm.
It's a switch that either goes yes or no,
Right.
Mhm.
correct or not. No, I'm just not.
0, 1, 1,
0, 1. That's okay. And so basically, it's an electronic signal that goes one way or the other that creates nothing more than an output. Okay? Do you know anything about coding? Good. So when I say this, except for the person who's gonna watch it on video, they're gonna go, God, that guy's an idiot. You know, he's talking. You know, but at least with you guys, I'll sound cool, right? No. Let's pretend we're gonna go dam up a river. Okay? And we got a river here that's flowing this way. Okay? This dark circuit, I guess. And I want to dam this thing up right here. But in order to do so, I got to work on this dam, correct? Can't just, you know, start the dam there. Right? With the water there, got to have dry land to start your dam. So what do you got to do? You got to get the water out of the way. So what you do is you put a levee here, an off switch, right? And it sends the water this way. But you don't want to wreck my beautiful porphyrian tree, right?
Mhm.
So you put another levee here, and it sends the water going this way, right? And then what you can do is you put another levee here, and you redirect the water back this way. And all this time, this is dry until the day you take this levee away and bring it back through. So on a circuit board, you know, and it's complex and all that stuff, when you hit a key on your keyboard that is labeled H, the computer doesn't know what is painted on that. The phone knows that there is an imprint that makes a connection, electrical connection. And that electrical connection will send a signal towards a certain way through on and off switches, right? And you, in hitting your buttons, are creating nothing more than on and off switches that result in lights coming on your phone. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The phone is not aware of it. The phone functions. If I Google, and this is perfect, if I Google how to train, and I'm trying to learn Spanish, miserably, okay? But if I go to Google Translate and I translate this word, and then all of a sudden a bunch of electronic signals go through, and when those electronic signals hit a certain pattern, what emerges is a bunch of shapes on the screen, and I read that as going, si habla español, right? Do you speak Spanish, right? Or no?
Yeah.
Yes, I speak Spanish, right? Right. But this exemplifies what's called, so functionalism says the mind is nothing more than a computer that functions to do certain things.
The mind, not the brain.
We are the brain. That's, functionalism says that the mind is identical to the brain,
Okay.
Mental events are brain events, but those brain events are nothing more than functions.
Okay.
So emotions are a function, your will's a function, what I'm saying is a function. The brain is, you are your brain, and the mental events that we call, whatever they may be, pain, right, is a function of the brain. It's not, it's like your phone and Google. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, good. Now, this brings up what's called the Chinese room experiment. I've already given you something about it, like kind of Google Translate. So, in the Chinese room experiment, this is how we determine whether or not something, again, is identical. You say, is it true? Is the mind nothing more than a function or a collection of functions? Just like artificial intelligence in your computer up there, right? Okay. So let's imagine we got, this Chinese, it's called the Chinese box. Let's pretend there's a guy in here, right? Smile on his face. He's got a cap on, hanging out. Yay, here I am hanging out. And you walk up, actually, let's put a frown on your face, because you don't know how to translate this Chinese character. Now, by the way, this isn't just for you, it's just for the fact that I don't know Chinese. So I don't use Chinese room experiments, I usually use Hebrew, right? So I would say, hey, you put on here, and I would put Vav, hey, hey, there we go, Yahoo, no wait, I got it wrong. I'm blowing it. Yod, hey, Vav, hey. Tetragrammaton. Right? He walks up, I don't know what this means. Okay? And he hands it off to this guy, and he takes it, and he goes, well, I don't know what it means. And he goes over to a cabinet, and let's say it has the number 1 on it. Okay? And he takes that paper with the number 1, he puts it in the cabinet, and next to it is the number 1, a little thing, and another piece of paper, and he hands out the piece of paper to him, and it says, let's put our guy walking away now, happy because it has been translated as Lord. He's like, yeah! Okay. This guy functioned to translate because he took one copy of the thing that said the word, and he handed him a copy that said another word. And he functioned to translate the word. Okay? Does the Chinese box, in this case our Hebrew box, know the language?
No.
No, not at first, no.
He doesn't know.
It only becomes when it's translated.
Well, he didn't
But
know.
He didn't know. No, he didn't know in the box.
He's going to the box to translate it. The idea, now he may know it now.
Right.
Point being is the box didn't know it.
Right.
But the box did the translate.
Right.
Okay, just like your Google Translate does it. What is missing with the Chinese box experiment was his awareness of the language. It's like your calculator functions to do 2 plus 2, but it lacks something. It lacks awareness, the mental event of awareness, consciousness of the translation itself, of the language. Calculator doesn't know what 2 plus 2 is, and the Chinese box doesn't know Chinese. But it did function. You cannot say that it didn't function. Here's another problem with functionalism. It's called the problem of reverse qualia. The problem of reverse qualia. That's my ceiling, okay, or the wall, okay, guys? And we're in this is perspective, okay? So here's our floor,
Okay.
and it's going towards the wall, okay? And I'm gonna put a box right about, where's my horizon line? If I'm looking down there. All right, so let's just do something like that. There's a box over here. Perspective's not really working for Okay, so let's put a box here, and let's put another box, I don't know, right here. Horrible looking box. Looks like I got out of the garbage. Okay, but nonetheless, we got a couple boxes here. And we got a bunch of balls. Okay? And we got some red balls. Oh, I got a black turn. All right, and we'll just put R on that for red, okay? And we got a bunch of blue. Let's go green. I like green. Red and green are usually the two that are mixed up if you're colorblind. Okay? So you got a bunch of green balls. Okay? Anybody colorblind in here? All right, doesn't matter. This is reverse qualia. Reverse qualia. What I mean by that is the mental stuff that you perceive, the phenomena that you perceive, we will call qualia. Okay, whether it be the stuff you hear, your sensations of touch, colors, taste, smells, or whatever, we call that mental stuff qualia. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to say your visual phenomena is reversed, where you see red things as green, and you see green things as red. Okay, so you see red as green, and green as red. And I tell you, young lady, who has this problem, who sees red things as green things and green things as red things, would you like to be on camera, or would you like me to do it for you?
No, if you want to.
Come on over here.
Oh.
It's like a game show. Come on down. All right. So I want you to take this marker and I want you to do a function for me. Keeping in mind, this is box 1 and box 2. And keep in mind, you see all things that are red. So this ball is what?
Green.
It's red.
Oh, okay.
And
I
you
thought I
see
was
it
looking-
as green.
Ah, okay.
And this ball is
Green, and I see it as red.
as red. Let's give you another green one up here. Okay. I'm going to tell you to put all the red balls in box 2. Can you do that function for me?
Yeah.
All the red balls need to go in box 2. Keep in mind, you were born this way.
Okay.
So every time you see a red thing, you see it
I
as
know
green.
that okay, but I know that it's okay.
Go ahead.
I just
Where's the
know
red
that-
one? Point to a red one. How do you see that?
Green.
Okay, I'm going to tell you to put the red ones in box 2. Just draw an arrow to box 2 for all the red ones.
Okay. But
Don't-
if I aware that I have that problem.
Don't worry about being wrong. Just go with your
Okay.
gut right now.
Okay, I just
Okay, you put a red ball in box 2.
yeah.
Okay, I told her to put a ball in box 2. Did I not?
Yeah.
Did she function properly?
Yes, in this case.
Keep going.
Okay. Just put all the reds.
Yeah, she put all the reds in box 2.
Okay, can I do just?
I'm telling you, it's cleanup time. You know, we're in romper room, as they called it when I was 5 years old. You remember romper room? Okay, good. All right, so here we go. You know, hey, cleanup time. We're all putting, put the red balls in box 2. And can you put all the green balls in box 1? Now, remember, she sees all these things as green that are red, and all things that are red as green. Yet she still functioned properly. Thank you. Oops.
No, okay.
That's okay. She still functioned properly. Right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, if redness, keep in mind, is a mental event, and your redness is different than mine, hers, right? Because she sees it opposite than you.
Right.
If it's the same function, you got this problem here of absent qualia, or not, that's another problem, reverse qualia, where you've got the same function, but different stuff going on.
With different perception.
Perception and awareness.
Phenomena, qualia.
Okay.
It's the problem of reverse qualia.
Sorry.
So it's interesting because you could have, and now you got one more problem that the Chinese room experiment showed us, which was the problem of absent qualia. See, we're trying to explain, don't you understand? We're trying to explain the qualia, the function. We're trying to say, what is the mental here? And in her case, the mental was red where you see green. We're trying to explain that, and they're saying it's a function. Well, no, it is not. I mean, she certainly functioned the way I did, but we had different qualia. We had a different mental experience, but the same function. Which shows that mental events are not identical to functions. Because you could have opposites, right?
Right.
But you could also have the same function without the qualia, because we could have a computer or a robot do the same function and actually have absolutely no awareness, no qualia, no perception of greenness.
So I was right.
Yeah. The subject is
Right.
missing in
Right.
that
I
case.
got you.
And that's the problem of absent qualia. So functionalism says mental events are identical to functions. But the problem is you could have, well, the problem's always the qualia. Okay? It doesn't explain it away adequately. All right, I think I'm gonna give you one more. And then we'll talk a little bit about dualism. One more down here. I don't go into this too much because I'll tell you why in a second. This is called Paul and Patricia Churchland from UC San Diego discuss it. And it's called eliminative materialism. You'll have to forgive me sometimes, like Amy Coney Barrett. I don't bring any notes. I just, there it is, and here he is. And so, eliminative materialism. So, what Paul and Patricia Churchland say is, look, the words we use to describe mental events, pain, emotion, sadness, joy, perceptual, words. They call that folk psychology. And they say, those are just pre-scientific words, they say, terms, pre-scientific terms. And they say, as we get more scientific and discover what they actually are physically, then we will get rid of those pre-scientific folk psychological terms and replace them with scientific terms such as whatever, like pain as C fiber firing event, right? Whatever brain event we decide, we discover, pain to be, whatever physical thing that is, then we'll replace the word pain with, in this C fiber firing event, perhaps. But until then, we use folk psychological terms such as pain, desire, because those things aren't descriptive of the brain events. And so the idea is we will eliminate those terms and replace them with terms that correspond to what they really are materialistically. All right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Anyway, go ahead.
I think it does.
In my mind, when I read the book, I think it's Matter and Consciousness by Paul and Patricia Churchland. I have a copy on in my office. So I read it, that's what it said, but what it didn't say is what the mind, it was just saying, we believe that the mind and all mental events are physical events. So they'd be committed to type, except for the fact that they recognize the problems of it. But the problem is, so what they say is, what we have faith in is that as science catches up, we will be able to get rid of those folk terms that we don't know what they actually are yet, and we'll eliminate those and replace them with what they actually are, scientifically, as discovery allows us to, okay? Now, that's putting a lot of faith in materialistic science, but of course, they've already committed themselves to materialism as a philosophical standpoint. See, if you start off with materialism as a philosophical standpoint, as a scientist, then you're going to have to use what's called methodological naturalism or materialism, assuming all of your answers have to be material. And that is a bad way to go, because you are conducting science based on philosophy, and the philosophy of materialism, which is, we talked about non-physical aspects of reality that we can't deny, okay? When you're trying to replace non-physical reality and say what it really is something physical, you've got a hard, strong task ahead of you, okay? So it's very difficult, and they found that to be the case. Well, so, a guy named Jaegwon Kim, I'm probably not pronouncing his name correctly, the first name, I'm pretty sure I got Kim down correct. That's his last name. He wrote a book, Mind in a Physical World. And in this essay, I think it's probably 4-chapter essay, it's about a 100-page book, maybe a little longer. He's trying to defend the reduction of the mind to something physical. And at the end of it all, he says, look, we got some problems here. He says, he admits, the mind just does not want to reduce to something physical. Okay? Now, by the way, he's a physicalist. And he's admitting the problems of this. And so he says, the problem is if we don't find a way to reduce this, we may have to go down and consider some sort of dualism. But we don't want to go into that dark cave. Now, that's not a direct quote, but that's pretty dark close. He's saying, we got to find out, or we're going to have to admit dualism. We don't want to admit dualism because we don't want to go down that dark cave. Why does he not want to go down that dark cave? Well, why does anybody not want to go down a dark cave? It's not because they're afraid of caves. It's afraid of what they're going to find in the cave. And what do you find in the cave of souls? You know, when you admit souls exist.
Souls.
Well, you start to have to admit, some non-physical reality, that your physicalism is false. Perhaps a soul smack of religion. You might have to start acknowledging that. You're afraid of bears in the caves, right? And in this case, it's a theological cave, right? And so, I remember reading that book. I did several précis on each chapter. But yeah, his conclusion was not a good one for his counterparts as materialists, because he doesn't want to admit defeat, but he's admitting they're not winning. Okay? And that's, in my mind, that's a good thing, because I'm going to defend the soul. So anyway, so the problem with eliminated materialism, the problem is the soul just doesn't eliminate. So Paul and Patricia, J.P. Moreland called them the flying churchlings once, and I loved that. They're going to insist that apparently one day science is going to save them, okay? So when people start throwing the word science around, it's just vague enough for them to put faith in something that they don't know, okay? But anyway, so that is our Porphyrian tree. As you can see, I didn't deal much with idealism. I don't take it unseriously, okay? That's not, but it's just not my fight. My fight is against this, okay? We live in a world that is much more than physical. And we live in a world where people insist that it is only physical. So when you go to any other college, if you choose to go to a grad school that's not HBU and you're not a good Christian, with a great, scholar in front of you, they may too, especially if you're going into a science program. You're gonna fight this.
Yeah.
Okay? And they're gonna assume this is A is B. This is your mind, this is your mental event, this is the brain event. Now it may follow that the brain event, if you fix the brain event, we can also fix the mental event. But that's fine, because sometimes we do have broken brains. Okay, but it doesn't follow that just because that all mental events are the result of bad brain events. Sometimes bad brain events are the result of bad mental events. Which brings us, one of the problems, by the way, Kim had a problem with is called top-down causation. Top-down causation. That's going to bring us over to dualism. Top-down causation is the mental causing the physical.
Can you repeat that, please?
Top-down causation. Top-down causation is the mental having causal power over the physical, okay? Now, if the mental is a phenomenon that emerges from the complexity of the parts, it should not have any causal power. It is an effect. It is not a cause. It is the result, if that makes sense. So, the car driving down the road casts a shadow. Here's the tire, here's the shadow. As the car drives down the road, the shadow goes with it. The shadow's not driving the tire, okay? The shadow has no causal power, no will. The shadow's just along for the ride. The shadow's not like, hey, slow down. Hey, it says slow down. Say it again, nothing's gonna happen. Shadows don't say anything, first of all. If they did, tires are not obliged to answer. So, we talk about this. One of the things Kim mentioned was this idea, like you have the placebo effect. What is the placebo effect? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Just
You look a little sick today.
a little sleepy.
I don't know. Are you sure you're not sick?
Yeah, I'm a sick.
Okay, don't tell me sick. We all started saying that, right? That's a joke. You look fine. You're as handsome as ever.
Oh, thank you.
Okay? Yeah, that mask, it just pulls the whole thing together. It's like a big Lebowski's rug. Anyway, I was joking. That's a joke. Like, what if you came in and everybody started saying that, right? That you're sick, right? And all of a sudden you go, yeah, now that I think about it. And then you go, your mind has convinced your body to be sick. Okay? So you have what's called the psychosomatic illness. The suke, the soul, has caused the soma, the body, to feel sick.
Right.
Your mind did that. Your body didn't do that. And so, what about not just psychosomatic? What about people who get healed? Say, by the way, through the power of prayer. Some people say through the power of positive thinking, whatever. Or just through the placebo effect. You take a placebo and you get healed, and they go, well, yeah, some of you are going to get healed for the placebo effect. Well, what the heck's the placebo effect? It's a sugar pill. Are you telling me that sugar cures cancer?
No.
No, but somehow the mind did, right?
Yeah.
And so Jaquan Kim has this wonder. He's just like, it just seems that the mind has an awful lot of power over the body, and if the mind has a lot of power over the body, then the mind cannot be the body or a result of the body. That is, it could, if it's a result, it should not have this top-down causal power over that which causes. It's like the shadow. It shouldn't be moving the body moves it.
Right.
You should be along for the ride. So let's go back to mereology. What if the mind is nothing more than a pile of atoms, right? And it emerges. A new property called the mind emerges. Well, then you go, well, what does that do to your free will? Remember, one of the faculties of the mind was your will or your volition, the ability to make choices, to do or to not do, to when I threw the marker at you, you caught, you threw it back at me, I chose not to.
Right.
That was in another class. So.
I get it.
Usually, like, I didn't see that. But no, so if you're a result, then you're not a cause. Okay? If you're the result, if your mind is the result of the brain, then you don't have a brain, your brain has you. Okay? So with dualism, we're going to give you two types. And one is substance dualism. The other type of dualism is kind of a Cartesian dualism, where you are, emerging from the mind. It's called property dualism. And property dualism says that the mind emerges from the complexity of the whole of the brain. Thus, it is a response. It is a result. It emerges. It is epiphenomenal. The phenomenon comes from it, okay? And it emerges, okay? So, in one sense, now we're going to talk about our. Remember how I gave you guys some what we call distinctions, the real distinction, the modal distinction, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to contrast the substance dualist position with the property dualist position. The property dualist position says that the mind emerges from the body, that is, from the complexity of the brain. Therefore, you could have the brain without the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't have the mind without the brain. What kind of distinction is that going to be? Modal or real?
Real.
A modal distinction says that you could have A without B, but you cannot have B without A.
Okay, so then it would be modal.
So you could have the brain without the mind, but you cannot have the mind without the brain. That's a modal distinction, right?
Right.
A substance, apology. A real distinction says you could have A without B, but you cannot have B without A. I'm so tired. A real distinction says you could have A without B, and you could have B without A. I could have the cap without the pen and the pen without the cap. A without B and B without A. They're really distinct. It just means they're two different things. The substance dualist is the claim that you could have the soul without the mind or brain, and the brain without the soul. So we could go on a field trip. I can get a bunch of pickaxes and some shovels. We can go dig up a bunch of cadavers out in the and then we can open them up and pop open. There's a brain, right? But there's no mind there. We can have that with it.
Right.
The question is, can you have the mind without the brain? Well. So this isn't me talking. It is me talking, but this isn't me just making it up. I say this as a little preface every time I give this lecture. Is there evidence that the soul can exist without the brain? Let's put it in different ways. Can mental events exist without brain events? And if mental events could exist without brain events, it shows that mental events are not brain events. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You can have brain events without mental events and mental events without brain events. They are really distinct. Okay? And all you have to do is imagine it. But we don't have to imagine it. So it is not uncommon. I'm sure you've heard this too. Once we get older, as you get older, you're going to meet people. First person I met, I was probably maybe 9 years old. Went over to our neighbor's house, and there was a guy sitting there, and he has a bald head, and he, we almost out of class. What time? We got 5, 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay, good. We got plenty of time. It's only a 20-minute story. Joking. He had a big gash on his head. It wasn't a gash, it was a scar, and he's bald. He told us, he said, yeah, I fell off a roof, and I died. And I went, oh my God, you died, but yet you're here. And he said, God spoke to me. And I changed my life. Okay? Now, some people die, and they experience, not God, they experience the devil. And then they come back, and they're like, okay, now I'm getting to know God.
Right.
Okay, it's not always the same experience. But there are books about this. Okay? One book I read that had accounts of it was 1 minute after you die. Is a question, where will you be 1 minute after you die? I wrote a cool song years ago when I played in a band. 1 minute after 1 minute after you die. Might not have been that cool to others, but I liked it. The question is, can you have these mental events without the brain events? So he was brain dead. Now, how do we know somebody's brain dead? What you mean by that is they are not having their electroencephalograph, which measures brain waves. There is no brain activity, but there is mental activity.
Okay.
So can you have mental activity without brain activity?
Yes.
How often do you hear the stories of somebody who was dead on the table with no brain activity? The doctors are doing rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock to figure out who's going to go tell the family, and the guy's floating, not really floating, but he is perceiving the doctors do this, going outside of the building, perceiving other things that are happening, hearing the conversation out in the thing. He is completely without any brain activity. So you're having mental events without brain events, and then all of a sudden he comes back, opens his eyes, and goes, "I'll tell you what, don't tell anybody. You don't have to do rock, paper, lizard, Spock, I'm here." And they're like, "Oh my God, you're alive. You were dead for like 10 minutes. And how'd that happen?" And he goes, "Well, I saw it all, and then I had all these experiences." Well, he had all these mental experiences without brain experiences, without brain events. He had mental events without, and if you have A without B, that shows that they are distinct. Okay, and if you could have A, be it the soul and substance, the soul being its own substance and the body being its own substance, there's a dual substance there, the body and the mind, as a real distinction, that means you can have one without the other. You have a bunch of dead bodies that have no souls in them. Just as Paul said, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, to show that I am not my body.
Right.
Okay? So the substance dualist is going to hold that there's a real distinction, test question of course, there's a real distinction between the body and the soul. The material, the property dualist is going to say there's a modal distinction between the body and the soul. The problem with the property dualist is it lacks top-down causation. It lacks free will. The substance dualists, they're really distinct, and in that case, the mind, the will is contained in the mind as a faculty of the mind, and thus there is free will of the soul. And the body is just animated, possessed, so to speak, by the soul. And thus you can see why demon possession is a real event, where demon, another disembodied thing, comes into the body and takes possession of it. And then one must exorcise the demon.
It's called debuk. It's called a debuk in Hebrew.
Debuk in Hebrew, right? And so you've got the concept. Okay, so there we go. The literature's vast on this. This is not fanciful, wishful thinking. This is there's a person who wrote a book. Remember, something of heaven or something like that, like 10 minutes in heaven or something.
90 Minutes in Heaven.
90 Minutes
Don
in Heaven.
Piper.
Yeah, so he died of what is it all?
Car accident.
Was it a car accident? I thought he had meningitis.
Oh,
His
yeah.
meningus basically it's meningitis. I don't know much about medicine, but however he died. Oh, you're thinking about the other one, where he's actually in the house or something, or?
No, that was 30 Minutes in Hell.
9 minutes in heaven, 7 minutes, 2 minutes after 1 minute after you die. Point being, there's a lot of literature by people who have experienced, from a medical standpoint, people who have had mental events without brain events. That's the key. I'm trying to keep it where you go, like somebody could die off in a corner and they go, "Oh, I came back." Well, maybe they were just not dead. Maybe like, the Princess Bride, he's almost dead.
Oh yeah,
Mostly dead.
slightly alive.
Slightly alive. No, totally dead. We're talking no brain activity. But yet there's mental activity.
Right.
So, and we have people who have witnessed this, reported this, written on this, And so we've got great attestation that it exists, that mental events can exist without brain events, and that's what my point I'm trying to make. And so, but you get all these great books about it, and it's usually similar. I saw, an angel, I saw a demon, I came back and started worshiping the Lord. Praise the Lord. And so, point being is, substance dualists make the claim that you can have A without B and B without A. Okay? So it seems pretty clear we can have bodies without souls. The argument now is, can we have souls without bodies? And yes, we can. That's what I was just making the claim. And if we have souls without bodies, and the will is contained in the soul, then we have free will. There is no other view other than substance dualism that I will argue, and I think even physicalists will agree with this. There is no other view that maintains free will. Every other view seems to imply determinism, physicalistic determinism.
Just fallacy.
Well, it is false.
It is.
A fallacy would be
It's a falsification.
no, a fallacy is a means of reasoning that is wrong. So like, you A plus B equals C, which must mean B plus or something.
Right.
It's like an or ad populum would be some kind of false fallacy, just because the population believes that we must believe it, or ad hominem, rather than attack your argument, I attack you. Those are fallacies. Okay. But a false statement. It's a false statement.
Yes, it is.
So a fallacy is different than a false statement. A fallacy is a problem with reasoning, okay? A reasoning procedure, but it is false. It is false that we are determined. And of course, if we are determined, let's pretend we are determined. Who could blame us for anything? You've got no way of blame. Nobody's blameworthy and nobody is praiseworthy. And with that, I'm going to end it because we're out of time, and we'll pick it up on